Lost media is a concept that is fascinating. Just the idea that a piece of media, a piece of recorded history, developed by and was viewed by real people, could simply be lost to time like that is a strange concept. A concept that makes even the most mundane pieces of media interesting, by the simple fact that they've been forgotten. And the lengths people go to find these lost pieces of media is incredible. Subreddits like r/lostmedia exist to find and document these cases of lost media, whether that be in the form of old TV shows or niche childhood cartoons from a bygone era. With hundreds of thousands of members, the r/lostmedia subreddit is really committed to finding these pieces of lost history. But that really begs the question, why? Why are these pieces of media, no matter how boring or uninteresting on their own, so sought after by the people who attempt to find them? Why are there search parties of, in some cases, hundreds of people to recover these seemingly unimportant things? Well, to figure that out, we need to dive deep into the forgotten and answer the question, why are we so drawn to lost media? How does media go missing? I mean, things like lost TV shows, no matter how niche, have still been produced by a group of people and have been viewed by countless more. Especially now that we're in the digital age, it's hard to think about a TV show or a movie that can simply be forgotten with nothing but subtle nods to its existence. Of course, things like a lack of physical copies of a show or movie can easily make these things lost. It's a sad truth that in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, TV shows that aired only for them to be so bad and get so much negative backlash that they simply never air again and are never made into physical copies usually become lost media. Shows that, at the time, were so niche and so disliked by the small number of people that did manage to see it that it was simply never recorded by anyone. It's almost sad, but inevitable. However, there is another way that media can go missing. Sometimes physical copies do get created, but the copies get destroyed. Such is the fate of a lot of early 1900s silent films. A lot of these old gems were preserved very well in a vault in New Jersey. However, a fire in 1937 burned every last silent film in those vaults. After the fire had been put out, 57 truckloads of burnt and unwatchable silent films were hauled away from the scene. It's one of the reasons why only 2,749 silent films exist today. As many as 75% of all silent films have become lost media. Those are just two ways that media can be lost. But all of the ways media used to be lost predates the internet. In the digital age, we no longer really have lost media. I bet you've heard the saying, what you put on the internet stays on the internet. And this claim has some truth to it. We have become very good at preserving things online, so the fact that a piece of recorded history is nowhere to be found, not on search, not in videos, not in anything, is almost unsettling, like a ghost that you can never see, but you can certainly remember. These pieces of now lost media had creators, they had funding, and people did watch them at some point, but now all that's left of lost media is the vague memories of the people that watched them. In fact, a lot of searches and eventual recovery of lost media is because somebody posts about something they remember seeing, but have never seen again, and have never been able to find. Like I mentioned earlier, our preservation techniques are so good now that the thought of something that has existed not popping up on any search engine is almost weird. Because these things aren't stored digitally. In a way, lost media is one of the last things we have stored exclusively in our heads in the form of memories. A consequence of this is the fact that our memories are flawed. We will inevitably get something wrong about whatever lost show or movie we're trying to remember, an incomplete memory. Of course, because we only store the memories of lost media in our heads, we can never truly know the amount of lost media that has simply never been recalled by anyone. It is truly lost, not just in a sense that we can't recover it, but in the sense that it has completely disappeared, almost like it never existed in the first place. Not stored in our minds, and definitely not stored on any search engines. I wager that for the hundreds of lost media that gets remembered and recovered, thousands of pieces of lost media are simply forgotten and never talked about ever again. I mentioned earlier that we don't really see lost media anymore in the digital age. The whole whatever you put on the internet stays on the internet. We seem to preserve everything online so well with tools like the Wayback Machine and other internet archives. You would expect everything from this time to be documented and recorded, but that's just not true. Despite the fact that our preservation efforts are the best they've been throughout all of history, we still lose things. We still have many examples of lost media somehow. It's paradoxical. I call this phenomenon the digital age paradox. Why is it that now more than ever, we actually get more of our creations lost? Well, even in the digital age, there are a number of ways that media can still get lost. Sometimes, old videos made by now successful creators get deleted or destroyed for various reasons, and they become lost media. It isn't just videos either. Flash games used to be very popular in the early 2010s and late 2000s. These browser-based games that were hosted on sites like Cool Math Games or Newgrounds. However, a lot of these early Flash games are now lost, after Macromedia Flash shut its doors on December 31st, 2020. Before this, many Flash games were archived, and if it wasn't for works like Flashpoint, which has archived over 36,000 Flash games, we would have ended up losing a lot more than we actually did. That being said, many Flash games were still lost. But Macromedia Flash wasn't the only example of digital media being wiped out completely by an obsolete platform. Google Video was another case of this happening. If you don't know what Google Video was, it was pretty much Google's equivalent to YouTube. When Google eventually bought YouTube, Google Video was shut down, and along with it, thousands of videos from the old internet. So those are two ways that even in our digital age of constant preservation, we still get lost media constantly. Lost media doesn't have to be televised or posted, however. They can also be things like home videos. Think about it. In the 80s and 90s especially, home videos were taken on these bulky, cheap film cameras that would then be put on VHS tapes. Think about just how many home videos stored on VHS tapes are now completely gone. It's lost media in the same way anything else is. But it's a lot more relatable. If you grew up in the 90s, where do you think the recordings of your 5th birthday are right now? Probably either destroyed or gathering dust in a corner somewhere, never to be viewed again. That's the fate of many VHS tapes containing family memories, doomed to never be viewed again. That concept is the very basis of analog horror. If you somehow haven't heard of analog horror, then allow me to get you up to speed. Analog horror is a horror subgenre that utilizes early TV broadcasting and VHS tapes to tell a terrifying story. But analog horror begs the question, what if you uncovered an old TV broadcast or found an old VHS tape and found something disturbing on it? Analog horrors like Local 58 or the Mandela Catalog tap into this. Local 58 depicts a local news network with very cryptic messages. The Mandela Catalog is a series of tapes that you were never meant to see, which leads to the question, how can we truly verify that things like Local 58 never existed? In the thousands of local access news channels on Analog Connections, how can we really be sure that nothing disturbing had ever been shown on one of them? The answer is, we can't. We would simply never know, because a lot of analog news networks have made the change to digital, and the analog part was never recorded. How can we truly know that somewhere out there aren't several tapes containing disturbing imagery and clues to a much bigger, more disturbing reality? The answer is, we can't. Because if this stuff did exist, it would almost certainly be lost media at this point. But does it exist? Well, probably not. But it's a fun thing to think about. However, my fascination with analog horror goes beyond just videos. The analog horror subgenre works perfectly with the medium of video games. Day 178 is an indie game that really represents analog horror. First off, the PS1 aesthetic perfectly substitutes the low-quality visuals of analog horror. Also, a small detail, I love the fact that the farther you go from objects, the more low quality they become. You only have to step a couple of feet away from this TV screen for the text to become unreadable. It's a cool detail and adds to the horror, as things far away are much harder to make out. You start the game as someone who hasn't left their home in 178 days. The reason for this is a sudden lockdown that confined everyone into their homes. A detail I love is the mysteriousness behind what locked everyone in their homes. We're never told, only given subtle hints like warnings not to answer the door even if it sounds like a loved one, or get near any windows. The only way to get basic necessities like food and water is for a pneumatic tube to deliver it to you directly. If you have money, of course. And if you can't work from home, then good luck. Our protagonist is one such person, someone who can't work from home and can't make money because of it. Our protagonist resorts to drug dealing through the pneumatic tube in order to make enough money to afford food. After a problem arises from the tube delivery system that would get both you and the receiver of the drugs busted, AI Samuel L. Jackson, yes, you heard that right,
you have to get it back. You just have to. I sent you a magnetic car door and lock your house door.
tells you to leave your home and manually take out the drugs from the delivery system. And to do so, you must leave the safety of your home and go out into the city. What could go wrong? You interact with various analog technologies in order to solve puzzles, like listen to radio chatter in order to input a code. The reason I even bring this game up is because it really does capture the feeling of analog horror quite well. As said earlier, the dated PS1 visuals heavily contribute to this vibe. This whole thing feels like lost footage being uncovered. The entire game feels like a VHS tape, and I think that was the point. It perfectly represents analog horror with its dark themes, VHS-like aesthetics, and interesting lore. But I think the thing that really sells it is the PS1 era graphics. I really don't think the game would punch as hard without these graphics. The graphics are nostalgic, and I think nostalgia is something that plays a large part in why we're so interested in lost media. But don't just take my word for it. I've got my good friend Poi, who you should definitely subscribe to, here, to explain nostalgia in lost media.
When it comes to lost media, for many, it's not just the excitement of the hunt or that satisfying feeling of solving some kind of mystery, but rather the evocative pull of nostalgia that makes this pursuit so captivating. But why does nostalgia make lost media so appealing, even when sometimes its themes or visuals can be eerie or unsettling? At its core, nostalgia is a sentimental yearning and fiending for the past, a warm embrace of memories often seen through rose-tinted glasses. We remember the first movie we watched as a child, the video game we spent countless hours on, Minecraft 100% for me, or the theme song of a TV show that used to play when we were little, and time didn't seem to move. These memories are tinged with feelings of comfort, safety, and simpler times. So when these media fragments vanish, they leave behind a void, an emptiness filled with what-ifs and if-onlys. When we stumble upon or actively search for lost media, it's kind of like finding a piece of our past, a fragment of our own history that seemed to have been erased. This process brings back alive emotions and memories that may have been long forgotten, giving us an opportunity to reconnect with our younger selves. For some, it's an escape from the complexities and stress and anxiety and depression of adulthood, a little return to childhood wonder and naivety. Yet, the world of lost media isn't always this blissful. There's an inherent eeriness in things forgotten. Like an old photograph that's faded with time, lost media can feel uncanny sometimes. It's a fragment of the past that didn't quite make it into our collective memory. This can create a sense of unease, like walking into an old house that's been abandoned for years. Everything's familiar, but just a bit off. Psychologically, this dissonance can be explained through the concept of the uncanny valley. It's a hypothesis that when objects, or in this case media, appear and act almost, but not perfectly, naturally, it causes a response of revulsion among humans. Lost media might fall into this valley because while they're familiar, they're also unfamiliar because of their absence in our modern landscape of media. A lot of this comes from the age of these pieces of lost media. Usually they're incredibly old, which adds another layer of uncanniness to it, since it's really unlike anything we're around today, at least for the most part. However, in its eeriness, there's a warmth. The fear or discomfort isn't necessarily born out of the content itself, but the idea of forgetting. As humans, our fear of oblivion or being forgotten is deep-seated. So lost media, in its very nature of being lost, taps into this fear. When we uncover it, we're not just bringing a TV show or a game back to life, but also challenging the very idea of forgetting and showcasing our ability to remember, cherish, and relive. There's also an element of community in the pursuit of lost media. Across the internet, communities form around the quest to find and restore lost media. In these pursuits, nostalgia acts as the universal language. People from different walks of life, different countries, and different ages come together, driven by that common yearning for the past. These communities are built on shared memories, collective longing, and the thrill of the hunt. When a piece of lost media is found, it's celebrated as a victory, not just for the individual that found it, but for the entire community. Nostalgia plays a huge role in lost media. On my channel, Poi, I talk about nostalgia a lot, especially with things like weird core and liminal spaces, if you're interested. Anyway, thanks so much to Crescendex for letting me appear here, and back to him.
Lost media is one of those things that's an inevitability. It doesn't matter what time period, whether it be the early 1900s or the digital age, media goes missing one way or another. And I think that's one reason we're so fascinated by it. That no matter how good we get at preserving things, no matter how many things get stored so well that you can still go back and relive it, lost media still haunts us. Lost media is important. It sparks our curiosity, nostalgia, and a sense of adventure. We want to uncover and preserve these forgotten pieces of our past. The reasons behind our fascination with lost media are complicated. It's emotional, nostalgic, but most of all, it's mysterious. Lost media has found its way into all types of things. Analog horror, both in the form of videos and video games, is one such example. It explores the eerie possibilities of lost media and the mysteries that might lie with forgotten VHS tapes or old broadcasts. It capitalizes on our love for nostalgia and the unsettling allure of the unknown. Lost media is a reminder to all of us that nothing is forever, that even things we grew up with, even the things we have right now, are all temporary. And because of that, why not appreciate it? Appreciate life, because just like the media we view, it too is temporary. Really quickly before the video ends, I want to give a big shout out to Poi. If you like my videos, you'll probably like his. And thank you to Blender Render Chicken Tender for making this awesome render that is now my channel banner. He also has a channel of his own. His and Poi's channel will be linked in the description. And most of all, thanks for watching.